Please stand. Good morning, Brentwood. My name is Cooper Fleming. I would like to acknowledge that while we recognize and celebrate our veterans today, that this is being done on the traditional lands of the Malahat Nation, the 5 Nations of Cowichan, and the Wasanich peoples. I am a grateful guest on these lands, and I am thankful to receive my education here. I am in awe of the Malahat, Cowichan, and Wasanich people's generosity and commitment to fostering relationships with Brentwood College School. I also commend Brentwood's dedication to reconciliation through continuous efforts in fostering these relationships. Additionally, it is important to recognize the contributions of our Indigenous veterans, and I want to note that National Indigenous Veterans Day is recognized on November 8th. Historically, Canadian Indigenous veterans did not receive the same recognition or benefits as other veterans, having often been excluded from social and benefit programs such as the Royal Canadian Legion, making their transition to civil life much more difficult. When returning home, Indigenous veterans commonly lost status through the Indian Act, leaving them isolated from their families and communities. This left many Indigenous veterans facing systemic racism without receiving the same respect or support they deserved. As an intergenerational survivor of residential schools and a Métis student, I commend the strength of these people as they continue to thrive and prosper. Thank you for allowing us to celebrate and acknowledge all veterans on this land, and thank you everyone for being here in respect today. Please remain standing for the national anthem.
I'll just be a second while I get these slides to work. Archie, do you want to come do these for me? Now get started. Thanks. Good morning, Brentwood. So it's number 108. We're gathered here on November 5th to mark Remembrance Day. Officially, for those of you who don't know, in Canada, Remembrance Day is commemorated on November 11th, which falls during our upcoming break. November 11th was chosen to mark a day of remembrance in Canada because World War ended with an armistice at the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. Though the origins of Canada's Remembrance Day were the Great War, it has come to be a day to honor all those who have served in militarized conflicts since then, including World War II, the Korean War, and Canada's participation in Afghanistan. Remembrance Day serves multiple purposes. First, to honor those who served our country, many of whom lost their lives, others whose lives were forever altered due to injury, both physical and psychological, and all those who've contributed to fighting for peace in the world. And second, to think about the purpose of war and conflict and to hope for peace. I'd like to speak a little bit about the poppy that you all wear on your lapels today. The poppy has become a symbol of support and honor on Remembrance Day, to remember those who died and recognize those who've served. It was inspired by the poem written by Canadian military doctor, Lieutenant Colonel John McCrae. He wrote it after the death of a friend at the Second Battle of Ypres, when he noticed that the poppy was the first flower to grow and bloom in the churned and battle-scarred earth of a battlefield. On Remembrance Day, while we wear our poppies, we rightly celebrate heroism, the bravery under fire, the commitment to comrades, the unwavering devotion to duty that characterizes our Canadian contribution for fighting for peace. But today I'd like to look past heroism and grand stories and to think a little bit more about a difficult truth, the tragedy of war. Tragedy in the deepest sense of the word is not merely sadness, it is the destruction of potential, and it is the cost of choices that lead to suffering far beyond the battlefield. In World War I, or the Great War, almost 630,000 Canadians served and 66,000 lost their lives. Another 138,000 returned to Canada wounded. In World War II, over 1 million Canadian men and almost 50,000 Canadian women served. Nearly 45,000 were killed and 53,000 were wounded. In addition, 1,100 merchant marines were killed at sea. In Korea, nearly 27,000 Canadians served and over 500 died and 1,600 were wounded. And most recently, in Afghanistan, between 2001 and 2014, over 40,000 Canadians served, 158 lost their lives, and 1,800 returned wounded. In addition, since 1946, 125,000 Canadians have served as peacekeepers, with 125 of them losing their life in service. I share this data because these are significant numbers. The casualties that occurred means there are generations of artists who never painted, doctors who never healed, parents who never held their children, and teachers who never had the chance to stand in front of a classroom. One of the tragedies, then, is the loss of future. The unwritten chapters of Canadian life that were irrevocably sacrificed to the cause of global freedom. Even more tragic, maybe, is that the average age of the soldier in the world wars was approximately 26, with many soldiers who were not much older than all of you here today. They were young people, full of hope, and navigating the complex world of early adulthood. They left behind dreams, first loves, and simple pleasures. For those who did return, many carried wounds that could not be seen. I would argue that we have a moral duty to remember these invisible wounds too. Today we have diagnosis and treatment to explain some of these unseen injuries, but in 1918, when soldiers returned from Europe, they were expected to move on and start or restart their lives. If they behaved differently or oddly, they were described to have been shell-shocked and were often ridiculed or stigmatized, subjected to ineffective and appalling treatments, such as electroshock therapy, and in general pushed to the margins of society. This is yet another tragedy, the toll war takes on the soldiers' mental health and wellness and ability to function in society after they have served. The tragedy of war, however, is not just found in the trenches of Vimy Ridge or the beaches of Dieppe, or even in the modern theaters of Afghanistan, Ukraine, Sudan, or Gaza. It is a persistent, terrible thread woven through our human history, and it is happening now as we stand here or sit here in peace. Beyond the direct impact of fighting, there is significant collateral loss. For example, it's estimated that in World War II, 50 to 60 million civilians lost their lives, 6 million Jewish Europeans and other minorities were killed during the Holocaust, Millions died from starvation resulting from the disruption to the production and distribution of food. As many as 250,000 people died when the Allies detonated nuclear bombs in Nagasaki and Hiroshima. And today we see reports of mass famine in Gaza, civilian casualties in Ukraine due to bombing of residential neighborhoods, and mass atrocities leading to yet another humanitarian crisis in Darfur. When Canadians deploy on a modern peacekeeping mission, patrol dangerous waters, or provide humanitarian aid, they are trying to contain or prevent future tragedies. Yet even in the pursuit of peace, they witness the cost of the conflict: refugee crisis, shattered cities, and a complete collapse of civil society. The tragedy is that we, as a global society, seem so incapable of solving our differences without resorting to conflict. Therefore, one could argue that the most profound tragedy of all is that we seem to fail to learn the lesson that those who served before were teaching us. So, please look at the poppy you are wearing today. On the one hand, it is a symbol of bloodshed and conflict. On the other, it is also a promise that we will not take peace for granted. You may never be asked to face a foreign enemy on a battlefield, and that is the greatest victory that our veterans could hope for. However, war continues to rage in many parts of the world, and in 2025, I would say that we are experiencing a profound global shift, the outcome of which we're yet to comprehend. As our world becomes increasingly polarized, I urge you to fight against prejudice and stereotypes, against ignorance, against intolerance, and choose compassion and kindness over callousness. Choose dialogue and discussion over dismissal. Choose empathy over anger. And if you do that, then you honor the sacrifices made by those who went before us and fought for a more peaceful world. Let's not forget the sacrifices made nor the cost. Let's not forget the damage done to the families torn apart. Let's not forget what it's like to live in peace, and let's not take that peace for granted. Let's not forget the tragedy of war. Thank you.
Germany's invasion of Poland in September 1939 brought the powers of Western Europe and many of their global allies, including Canada, into World War II. Just over half a year later, in May of 1940, the Germans swept through the Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, and France, bringing the war directly to Western Europe. 2025 marked the 80th anniversary of the liberation of the Netherlands and the end of World War II. Following the pale orange arrows on the map behind me, you can see the movement of 175,000 troops that were part of the 1st Canadian Army as they worked their way through northern and eastern parts of the Netherlands from September of 1944 until April of 1945. They helped push the Nazi army back into Germany, the border between the two countries being marked on the map behind me in bright red arrows. The result of this Canadian push was freedom for the Netherlands, but the death of roughly 7,600 Canadian soldiers and countless Dutch civilians. The Netherlands had an existing relationship with Canada that had been built through early waves of Dutch migration to our country and grew through the war as Princess Juliana of the Netherlands and her family took refuge in Ottawa. In fact, Princess Marguerite, circled in red, was born in Ottawa's Civic Hospital in 1943. But it was during the push for liberation of the Netherlands that the unbreakable bond between our two countries was formed. This strong relationship continues today. One example of that is that just this year, one of the professional soccer teams in the Netherlands wore a jersey adorned in maple leaves and sporting the insignia of the Royal Canadian Dragoons, a military regiment instrumental in the liberation of the country. The relationship built between the Canadians and the Dutch during the destructive years of World War II is also an important part of my family story. A person's name can tell you a lot about their family lineage. Most here know me simply as Mr. Wismer or Mark Wismer. But this is my full name, Mark Orland Rulof Wismer. As a child, I did not really like my middle names. Both names seemed quite strange to me. They seemed old. I was not old. And early on, I often wished I did not have these names. These two names are the names of my grandfather and my opa. As I grew older, these two men became a very important part of my life and great mentors to me. Both were wonderful, hardworking, caring men, both incredible husbands, fathers, and grandfathers. Both were also veterans of World War II. Though my grandfathers were both soldiers long before I was born, I only really got to know them and their lives as soldiers towards the end of their time on Earth. I was in my early 20s when my grandfathers started to talk to me about their memories of war. I was a lover of history and someone who loved my grandfathers, so these stories were extremely compelling to me. I would sit and listen in reverence as they revealed portions of their lives which I had no idea about. Orland, Truman, Charles Wismer, and Rulof Meyer were born only 5 months apart in 1919 and 1920, but were born an ocean away from one another. Orland in Canada and Rulof in the Netherlands, both born in the shadow of World War I. Grandpa Orland was my neighbor growing up. He was playful, charismatic, and a pillar of our small community, which he had spent most of his life growing up in. Opa Rulof was a somewhat stoic and blunt Dutch immigrant. He had moved his wife and at the time his 4 children to Canada in the early 1950s after figuring out 3 Dutch brothers were too stubborn to run a family business together. As a child visiting Opa, when we inquired as to what his plan was for the day, we always got a chuckle, and he replied with the same line, W-O-R-K, work. Though they were very different men, they were both very much respected and loved by our families, and they were both tied together by their war experience in the Netherlands. Rulof, circled in red, was born and raised in Emmen, close to the German border in the northeast of the Netherlands. At the age of 19, he joined the Dutch military at the start of the war. When the Germans swept through the Netherlands in 1940, Opa was sent home. It was as a civilian, not as a soldier, that his real war effort was made. Opa and his younger brother used to pick up letters thrown from the Jewish people from their grimly named Holocaust trains, like the one pictured above, as they rolled through his town, headed for concentration camps in Poland and Germany. They would then mail these letters back to families. This was often the last point of contact between the prisoners and their relatives. Rulof also worked during the war for his family concrete business, which often meant he was transporting goods between towns in the Netherlands. This gave him the opportunity to be part of the Dutch resistance, which covertly moved people in danger out of the German-occupied areas and towards greater freedom in the West. At one point during the war, he made a business delivery with a downed British pilot hidden on the back of his truck amongst a load of goods, and a young Dutch Jewish person sitting beside him in the cab of the truck. Had he been caught, they all likely would have been shot immediately. But my opa always knew what was right, so the risks were acceptable to him. Many Dutch people risked their lives on a daily basis during the war in order to do things they knew were good and just. As the war progressed, the Germans began collecting young Dutch men and sending them to Germany to work in the factories. With 9 months left in the war, Roelof went into hiding before he could be sent away. He moved to the farm of his girlfriend, Rennie, who later became his wife. He spent his days and nights hidden away in the barn, often cycling on a stationary bike to charge a small battery that they would give their family a small amount of electricity at night. If he had been caught, it would certainly have led my opa and his future father-in-law to be shot or sent away to prison camp. But both took the risk, knowing what was good and just. Opa remembered fondly the jubilance of the Dutch people when the Canadians came through his town. By the end of the war, 20% of his life had been spent under the rule of Hitler's Germany. He was soon married and began having children, but he would never forget his war experiences. They had done a great deal to shape who he was. He also felt a great deal of thanks for Canadian soldiers who came from so far away to help liberate his people. They had given him back his freedom, and he was forever thankful for that effort. Orland, on the other hand, was born and raised across the ocean in Canada on beautiful Manitoulin Island. In 1942, he joined the Army. Growing up on a farm, my grandpa was very familiar with guns and was soon training new recruits on their rifles. In 1944, he was deployed to Britain. Eventually, his role shifted. He was sent to mainland Europe as part of the 1st Canadian Army that would work tirelessly to free the occupied Netherlands. Though his role was not in battle, he was often close enough to the front lines to hear shelling and the exchange of machine gun fire. Orland moved through much of the Netherlands, his unit being used to guard prisoner of war camps or displaced persons. Like my opa, my grandpa also fondly remembered the joy demonstrated by the Dutch people in their interactions with the Canadian soldiers. Complete strangers would come up and hug the Canadians in the streets and shower them with tulips as a gift for their hard work in helping reestablish freedom and democracy in the Netherlands. In 1952, Roelof moved his family to Canada. Despite speaking very little English upon arrival, Opa insisted that his family quickly adopt Canadian ways, even changing the spelling of his last name so it was more phonetic in the English language. He was not forced to assimilate. He was proud to become Canadian, proud of his new homeland, proud of his new citizenship, proud to be associated with a country that had done so much for his people during the war. Though they would not meet for many years after the war, Orland and Roelof had been tied together by their war experiences and got along famously when they did eventually meet. And although both Orland Truman Charles Wismer and Roelof Meyer passed away over a decade ago, I continued to learn more about them through family stories and through pieces of writing. Both were extremely proud Canadians. My middle names are no longer something that I find silly or a burden. They are a point of great pride for me. These two men I was named after were not decorated war heroes, but they were men who knew what was good and just, both in war and in everyday life. Each played played a small but important part in the war effort, and each will be remembered by those closest to them as noble and kind men. As Canada and the Netherlands continue to celebrate the 80th anniversary of the liberation of the Netherlands, let us remember all the men and women and the children who lost their lives. Let us remember those who lost family and friends and neighbors. Let us remember people like my grandpa and my opa, those who have been part of that war experience and all war experiences before and since. I know both of my grandfathers prayed often for the end to war in this world, and I do the same. Let us all be focused on seeking an end to war and emulating people like my grandfathers, those who were good and just, noble and kind, lest we forget.
Well, how do you do, young Willie McBride? Do you mind if I sit here down by your graveside and rest for a while neath the warm summer sun? I've been walking all day and I'm nearly done. I see by your gravestone you were only 19 when you joined the Great Fallen in 1916. Well, I hope you died well, and I hope you died clean, or young Willie McBride was it slow and obscene. Did they beat the drum slowly? Did they play the fife lowly? Did they sound the death march as they lowered you down? Did the band play the last post and chorus? Did the pipes play the flowers of the forest? Did you leave a wife or a sweetheart behind? In some faithful heart is your memory enshrined. And though you died back in 1916, in that faithful heart are you forever 19? Or are you a stranger without even a name, enclosed then forever behind a glass pane? In an old photograph, torn, battered, and stained, and faded to yellow in a brown leather frame. Did they beat the drum slowly? Did they play the fife lowly? Did they sound the death march as they lowered you down? Did the band play the last post and chorus? Did the pipes play the flowers of the forest? The sun, how it shines o'er the green fields of France. There's a warm summer breeze makes the red poppies dance. And look how the sun shines from under the clouds. There's no gas, no barbed wire, there's no gun firing now. But here in this graveyard, it's still no man's land. The countless white crosses stand mute in the sand. To man's blind indifference to his fellow man, to a whole generation who were butchered and damned. Did they beat the drum slowly? Did they play the fife lowly? Did they sound the death march as they lowered it down? Did the band play the last post and chorus? Did the pipes play the flowers of the forest? On Willie McBride, I can't help wonder why. Do those who lie here know why did they die? And did they believe when they answered the call? Or did they really believe that this war would end war? For the sorrow, the suffering, the glory, the pain, the killing and dying was all done in vain. For young Willie McBride, it all happened again, and again, and again, and again, and again. Did they beat the drum slowly? Did they play the fife lowly? Did they sound the death march as they lowered it down? Did the band play the last post and chorus? Did the pipes play the flowers of the forest?
On the 11th hour of November 11th, people will gather at war memorials to pay tribute to the millions who have been killed in war. Each will reflect in their own way. Perhaps veterans will think of comrades as they were the few seconds before their death. Wives will remember the endless vigil from husbands who never returned. Parents will think of children who were so young and alive when they left home for the first time. We who are here today at our Remembrance service might contemplate the horrors of war and contemplate the blessings of peace to forgive but never forget.
In the cemeteries of Europe, a simple maple leaf, inscribed on over 100,000 gravestones, tell visitors that Canadians killed in battle lie buried there. An awful price in human lives has been paid by the youth of past generations to achieve peace. By the act of remembering today, we ensure their sacrifices are not forgotten.
Originally, in the old Brentwood chapel, built by a past generation of Brentonians, etched in oak are the names of the fallen Brentonians who lost their lives during World War II, from 1939 to 1945. Please stand for the reading of the Roll of Honor, the Last Post, the 2 minutes of silence, and the Reveille. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember then. Please stand.
Alec Bellici, Dacre Barrett Leonard, Norman Beard.
John Bishop, John Bryden, John Campbell.
Arthur Coulter, Alan Dunlop, Robert Field.
In Gillespie, John Gillespie, Bruce Hanbury.
Barnett Harvey, Soltu Marlette, Alon Mayhew.
Lee Salter, Ralph Smith, John Stubbs.
Ken Osler, Richard Proctor, Robert Proctor.
Donald Stewart, Glenn Swinson, Michael Simmons.
Thornton White, Lawrence Wilkinson, Ted Williams.
Please be, please be seated.
She didn't know as she watched him go, if she would ever hold him in her arms again. Waved goodbye, trying hard not to cry, wondering when this dreadful war would ever end. And every day, in the knowledge that he could get unlucky in the fight and make the biggest sacrifice of all. So sing it out, we will remember them until the seas run dry. Come each November when we hear our children ask us why. In 2 minutes of silence, all the world stands still. We will remember them, and forever and ever we will. Some survived, standing tall with pride, as the poppy petals fall before our eyes. It's to them and to those who died, we owe our freedom. For us they paid the price. Forevermore, it is our duty to help to heal the human race, to make the world a better place for all. So sing it out, we will remember them until the seas run dry. Come each November when we hear our children ask us why. In 2 minutes of silence, all the world stands still. We will remember them, and forever and ever we will. Standing shoulder to shoulder, we sing our song, we sing them loud, and together we feel bolder. We are strong and we are proud. Through our singing we unite, as it was then and still is now. That is why we are inviting you to sing with us. We will remember them until the seas run dry. Come each November when we hear our children ask us why. In 2 minutes of silence, all the world stands still. We will remember them, and forever and ever we will.
Remembrance services are not a glorification of war. They are a call to peace. November 11th is a day of reflection. The torch of peace is being passed on. In the lobby is the roll of honor of the Brentonians who died in World War II. Once directed, as you leave the theater, please place your poppy there as a tribute to them. The lobby will be left open for you to do this as well at another time.